Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. It's probably no better time to talk about a uniquely American institution like Waffle House right before the eve of our nation's independence, but just happen to be serendipitous that we are. So I have the unique pleasure of introducing to you our CEO. WaltEhmer attended the Georgia Institute of Technology, graduated in '89 with a bachelor's in industrial and systems engineering. His journey at Waffle House started shortly after in '92, where he landed a job as a senior buyer in the purchasing department. Ended up getting promoted in '96 to director, and then in '99 to VP of finance. So he made that transition. In '01, he took over the role of chief financial officer. In '06, he was named the president. And shortly after, in 2012, he was also given the title of CEO. With over 1,800 Waffle Houses in 25 states, with 75% of them owned by our corporation, we definitely have a large footprint. Walt will speak to you a little bit about the Waffle House way and how we do business. I'm sure in his 24 years he can share with you the many things that he's seen, and I'm sure some of those are definitely included but not limited to the personalities that come into our units, come into our stores. Anthony Bourdain and Charleston, South Carolina, NBA personalities like Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, and pop stars such as Kim Kardashian and Kanye West for an impromptu photo shoot in Phoenix. So, it definitely spans a great number of people. He also serves on many different roles on civic and charitable organizations. Does a lot with his alma mater, Georgia Tech. We don't fault him for that, being Georgia fans. The one unique thing that I think he'll share with you is why we do what we do. And it's because we choose to invest in a particular commodity that tends to return year over year without doubt. It's not gold, oil, or any other precious commodity. It's people, and that's what we do. And without further ado, let me introduce to you WaltEhmer.
Good morning. Good morning. Vic asked me to do this. We talked about breakfast. I thought we were coming down to serve y'all, but I'm not sure what y'all want to hear from the Waffle House folks today. But there's an interesting fascination with our business, and I'll talk a little bit about why that is, and I think it has everything to do with what Vic mentioned in terms of the people aspect of our business. But before I get into kind of who we are today, let me give you a little sense of how we got here. We're somewhat of a unique story, but not that unique, really, in terms of the way a lot of businesses were developed in this country. And our history goes back to 1955, which coincidentally is the same year that McDonald's was founded. They got a little bigger than we did, and they took a different path than we did. But in 1955, actually prior to 1955, one of our founders, a guy by the name of Joe Rogers Sr., had gotten out of the war, and he had somewhat of an entrepreneurial spirit, and he wanted to start his own business. So he researched several different businesses. He lived up in Tennessee, Jackson, Tennessee, and he decided that he wanted to get into the soft drink business. And that seems like about the dumbest idea in the world today, trying to compete against Coke and Pepsi. But back then, it wasn't so far-fetched of an idea. But as I'm sure there's some bankers in the room and other folks who are in the money side of the business might be able to tell you, back in the early 50s, there wasn't really the access to capital that there is today. And so where you went to go get capital was you went to the people who had the capital and you tried to convince them to loan you some. He found a guy in Memphis that had a lot of capital, a guy by the name of Fred Smith. Mr. Smith owned a lot of different businesses, and he approached Mr. Smith with a business plan of how he was going to get into this soft drink business. And Mr. Smith listened to his pitch and said, "No, I'm not going to give you any money. But I do have a company over here that I think you'd be good at." And he said, "What's that?" He says, "Well, it's called the Tottle House." And I don't know if anybody in the room remembers the Tottle House, but they had gotten up to several hundred restaurants before they started contracting in size, I guess. But that was one of the businesses that he owned. He owned Greyhound Bus Line. He owned a couple other businesses, but he put him into the Toddle House business. And to think of a Toddle House was really a smaller version of a Waffle House, probably about 13 stools and a short order grill, just like we have today, but not the booths, and a much smaller building. And so Mr. Rogers worked his way up through the Toddle House ranks, and all along Mr. Smith kept promising him and the other senior managers that he was going to offer them the chance for ownership in the company. And so that promise kept coming, and Joe, being the entrepreneurial guy who wanted to be an owner of a business, kept at it. And he kept at it up until the point that Mr. Smith unexpectedly died, and before any of that became fruition. By this point, Joe Rogers Sr. had moved to Avondale Estates, a suburb of Atlanta. And he came to Atlanta because of the growing transportation hub that Atlanta was becoming with our airport. So it was easier for him to get to the multiple states. And he was lamenting this lost opportunity, if you will, with his neighbor, who happened to be a real estate guy, who also happened to be the guy who sold him his house in Avondale. And they were talking over the fence post in the backyard one day about how this was not going to come to fruition, and he wasn't sure what he was going to do and didn't know where he was going to go from there. And Tom Fortner, our other founder, like most good real estate folks, said, well, I got a piece of property. Why don't we open up a restaurant on it? And so they thought about it, and they did. And they opened up what they called was the Waffle House, practically copying most everything from the Toddle House. So everything's pretty much the same. Old number one is in Avondale Estates. We ran that restaurant up until, I think, the early 70s, and then it closed, and we ultimately reacquired it and turned it back into a museum. So it's not a functioning restaurant, and it's not even kind of like the World of Coke Museum where you can just kind of show up anytime. If you do want to go see it, call us. We'll meet you there and we'll let you in. Or follow us online. We tend to open about once a month or something like that. It's amazing how many people want to come and see this 13 stools and a counter. But we have fun with it. So Joe and Tom opened up the restaurant, and they brought a friend of theirs from the Toddle House days, and they were running that business. And then guess what happened? The folks at the Toddle House realized that one of their senior leaders was in competition with them in the city of Atlanta, and they weren't too happy about that. So they actually made him sell his ownership back, and they moved him back up to Tennessee. We like to talk about that era because the neighborhood that they moved into was right down the street from where Elvis lived. And so Joe Jr. Remembers riding his bike around with Elvis Presley back in the day. Elvis, I think, was a few years older, but so some interesting side stories there. The business, and it's something to kind of remember with our business, Joe particularly, but Joe and Tom, who were both in the war, were children of the Depression. And they felt that having debt was worse than just about anything you could have. So they set the business up, and the Waffle House people here can tell you that officially in Waffle House world, it's Wednesday right now. Our day ends at 7 o'clock in the morning. And people kind of wonder why we do that. Well, the reason we do that is back when Joe Sr. started the company, he felt like if the day ended at 7 and he still had enough money to pay all of his bills that day, that he could carry on for another day, thinking that if this thing didn't work out, he at least wouldn't be in debt to somebody and owe a lot of money. And so we just pressed on that way. We had one restaurant the first year. They went to a second restaurant the second year. I think the third restaurant the third year was pretty slow growth. And Joe and Tom never really thought this was going to be a big chain. Matter of fact, if you ask them, they would tell you that this was really something they were going to grow up to be of some size that they could include all their friends in, and then they could all go hunting and fishing together, which is what they love to do. But it crossed some threshold of success, and Joe quit the Toddle House, moved back to Atlanta, and started running the Waffle House. And so Tom became the real estate guy, Joe became the restaurant guy, and we started off on our path. And we grew, like I said, relatively slowly through the 60s, and then into the 70s when Joe Rogers' son, Joe Rogers Jr., he got out of Georgia Tech, there's the connection, and then the Harvard Business School with visions of becoming an investment banker, but did a case study on Waffle House with his professor at Harvard and kind of realized there was a whole lot of potential in this business. So he came back to run the business for a period of time, and the rest is history. He took over the business. We probably had about 100 stores, and we're, as Vic said, we're about 1,830 today in 25 states. Kind of an interesting side note to the story. The Tottle House is no longer in business. We actually own the Tottle House name. We bought it from whoever owned it back several years ago as a birthday present for Joe for his 90th birthday. So he always wanted to be the president of the Tottle House Company, and he is to this day. But the Tottle House, after Mr. Smith died, the Tottle House and the other businesses were basically sold off by the bank for at the family's benefit, and the money from the Tottle House and the other businesses went to his children, and pretty much most of that money ended up in the hands of his son, Fred Jr., and Fred Jr. took his inheritance and started another company in Memphis called Federal Express. So it's just, I always find it fascinating, this tiny little company that nobody really has ever heard of today started our little business, and FedEx, one of the biggest companies in the world, of course. To this day, Joe Sr. calls Fred Smith Jr., who's, you know, the guy you see on Fortune magazine and all that, he calls him Little Freddie to this day. I'm not sure if Fred Smith likes that, but that's the case. So Joe and Tom is 98, Joe is 96, Martha, Tom's wife, is in her 90s, she's about 95, I think, and Ruth, Joe's wife, is 96. So all four, the founders and their wives are all alive, so if you hadn't figured it out by now, this is the fountain of youth. So if you eat Waffle House every day, you too can live a long, long life. But we are a family-owned business. Joe, there was a lot of ownership transition in the 70s, and Joe Rogers Jr. navigated his way through that and became pretty much the sole shareholder of the company at that time, and began offering ownership to all the employees. So we are all owners. We own a doorknob or two here or there. The Rogers family, of course, owns the majority of the company, but we do have the opportunity to participate in the ownership, and it's not a phantom ownership program, it's an actual stock ownership program. We own stock in a private company, and the only caveat is we have to sell it when we leave. You can't keep it. A lot of people say, how do you invest in that? I say, well, you got to come to work, and then you got to stay. But that's kind of the way it works. So we've had several milestones in our company that I think help to define who we are. And you know, the fascinating thing about our brand to me is we don't advertise. Some of you might have remembered a billboard or two around town. We get bored every now and then and try a couple little things, but we don't advertise, and we might be one of the largest unadvertised brands out there. We are, as we said, 1,800 restaurants, 25 states, about 40,000 employees. And the thing that I know that I think of every night when I put my head in my pillow and every chance I get to talk to a group like this is, while we're doing this, there are thousands of people out there ringing that cash register for us, which is fascinating. Every night when I put my head on my pillow, I'm thankful for those folks for being up in the middle of the night doing what they do. And we try to do that with them. But it really does boil down to people for us. And I know all of your businesses, you probably feel the exact same way. We feel it in spades because of just the sheer magnitude of the people challenge of our business. And being in contact with so many folks on a daily basis, I mean, it's everything from the sourcing and the hiring and the training and the development and the motivation and how do we do that? Our business is not that complicated. It's just replicating it in a way that is consistent from Arizona to Delaware and all points in between, is so that when you walk into a Waffle House, you get the same experience. And Joe was pretty bright in the 90s. We actually established a people department, which now we have people scattered all across the country in our people department that work on the recruiting, training, and development of our associates. And so that was kind of a big deal. We don't even have an HR department in our company. We do some HR work, of course, because you have to, but we really call it the people department because it's all about the people in the restaurants. And then several years ago, we even developed a vice president of culture, because we recognize that our culture really is, in large part, our lasting competitive advantage. There's nothing that we do that other people can't do. Matter of fact, we say one of the secrets of our success is that we just do what other people won't do. And that's stay in this short order, 24-hour restaurant business. True to Joe Sr.'s point, I guess 1978 was the last year we really did not use up all the capital we developed in an annual basis in the expansion of the business. So we've been a net cash generator since the late 70s. So we have gotten ourselves out of debt, which makes times like right now with what's going on with the Brexit and the stock market and all that other stuff that I'm sure concerns most everybody in this room, it doesn't affect us too much because we're a private company. We don't have any debt. Most of our personal wealth is tied up in the Waffle House stock, if you will, and we're kind of in charge of that ourselves. We're kind of the theory, put all your eggs in one basket and watch that basket very closely. So the fact that we have no debt really provides us a lot of flexibility and power. And Joe Sr. was famous for saying, you can't go broke if you don't owe anybody anything. And that's kind of true. I mean, our business is, it's a profitable business. I like to tell our groups when we get together, always try to say the same thing over and over again, which is we're healthy, we're growing, and we're profitable. We'll add about 65 or 70 restaurants this year. We'll close probably a half dozen that, aged out or got taken by the DOT or something like that. But it's a tortoise in the hare business. It's nothing fancy, it's nothing sexy. I tell people all the time, it's just bacon and eggs, but it's slow and steady wins the race. And you wake up one day and you got 10 more restaurants, and every time we add another restaurant we need 25, 30 more people, and every time we add another 3 restaurants we need all those people plus another district manager, and every time we add another 9 restaurants we need all those people plus a division manager, and area vice presidents and super area, we run out of words, super area vice presidents, and super duper would probably be our next one. But we all do the same thing, and I think we teach our folks, what is it that makes Waffle House special? There really isn't anything magic to it. I wish I could give you kind of the silver bullet. I'll tell you my theory, and then I'll tell you what we try to teach our folks. My theory about why Waffle House is always talked about, and pay attention to this, by the way, because if there is a car accident in front of a Waffle House, they say there was an accident in front of the Waffle House. If it happens in front of a McDonald's or a Kroger or a Walmart or a car dealer, they just say there was a car accident at the intersection of what and what. For some reason, our brand makes people pay attention. And that's mostly good. And Vic mentioned a lot of it. Anthony Bourdain was on the deal, and Stephen Colbert was in one of our restaurants the other night shooting some stuff. I was coming back from a deal at the Fox Theater with my son a year or so ago, and I got a call that P. Diddy, he's got a lot of names, so P. Diddy and Rick Ross were at a Waffle House without our permission shooting a video, and so I kind of drove by, and they're like, "Oh, we love Waffle House. Could you call and get our permission, maybe?" So, why is it that people want to be associated with that? People pay attention to our brand, and so here are my theories as to why that is. Number one, It's because we're open 24 hours. I mean, let's face it, a lot of strange things happen at night. And we love taking care of you folks. We work a lot of nights. We work every New Year's Eve for sure. And you all are very interesting people in the middle of the night. So there's a lot of interesting things. And a lot of those celebrities and music folks and whatever, they kind of do what they do. And then in the middle of the night, they want to go get a bite to eat. And, well, let's face it, we're about their only choice. But we are there. So a lot of things happen in the middle of the night. And that creates a lot of interesting stories. Most of the people who come up to us want to tell us about their late night stories. So I try to remind people we are open during the day. It's okay to eat breakfast and lunch with us as well. The second thing, I talked about this with a couple people outside, we're not everywhere. But where we are, we're everywhere. So we're kind of ubiquitous in the South. And so people from the Northeast or the West Coast, they show up here having never seen a yellow sign, and then all of a sudden they're everywhere. And I came down from Atlanta this morning and wanted to make sure I was on time, so I didn't get to stop at all of them on the way. But I'm always still amazed at just how many signs there are between here and there, wherever you're going. And so people from other places show up, and they just kind of want to know, what's this all about? There is a big element of how we work, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Because we all wear the uniform every day, and we don't have a white glove inspection tour. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. And then the last piece of it is something that our founders gave us that Joe Jr. was wise to never take us away from, and a lot of people in the restaurant industry have, is when you get successful, you begin to change, and you think, well, we're really good, so we're crowded, let's make a bigger restaurant so we can seat more people, then make a bigger restaurant. We'll expand the menu, we'll do all these things, and we've been very true to sticking to who we are. And so I like to tell folks, you come into our restaurant and you can't get away from us, and we can't get away from you. And so 98% of our success, I would tell you, is based on the fact that we build a relationship with our customers. And so there was a lady who now has a huge job at Coca-Cola, but several years ago she was working her way up, and she got on our account team, if you will. And at some meeting one day she said, I think I was president at the time, she said, I really like to spend the day with you in one of the restaurants so I could kind of learn about what's going on in your business. And I, without hesitation, said, well, you'd be completely wasting your time. And kind of shocked, comes the Coca-Cola school of how do you interact with your customers. And I said, well, we can do that. I said, but you really won't learn about our business. I said, where do you live? And she told me, and I said, there's a Waffle House, right around the corner. She says, yeah, I go there all the time. And I said, well, pick a week when you're going to be in town, all week, not traveling. I said, and stop by that restaurant every morning on your way to work. And if you hadn't figured out what makes us special by the end of the week, there's nothing I can do to teach you that. And Wednesday afternoon, she called me and she said, I got it. I said, what do you got? She said, well, I walked in that restaurant the first day, and they were nice. They greeted me, and I said, can I get a cup of coffee? I didn't even tell her she could have gotten a Coke, but she said, can I get a cup of coffee? And she got a cup of coffee, and she went on her way. She says, the next day I came back. She says, I walked in. They said, hey, we remember you. You were here yesterday. Coffee, right? 2 creams? And she said, yeah. And they chatted for a few minutes. They found out what her name was, whatever else. She says, I came back this morning. I walked in. My coffee was sitting there with my 2 creams. They called me by name when I walked in the door. We chatted for a few minutes, and she said, why don't you sit down and get a bite to eat? And she says, I did, and now I know everything about her family. She knows everything about my family. And, within your first week on the job, you realize there are a lot of people in our restaurants who come there frequently. And it is very much a social interaction. For the folks not the younger folks who are sitting at my table here, but the folks who've been around a couple of years, we used to like to call it cheers without beers. And, Howard Schultz, who's built an incredible company, Starbucks, talks about Starbucks being the third place, home, work, and the third place. We were the original third place, maybe for slightly different clientele, but ours, it's Americana. This is where the world kind of comes together, and they talk and they meet, and some people are very vocal, and some people just want to be in the, in that setting. Now, I think the food is exceptional. I eat 2 meals a day in a Waffle House just because I love the food. And I think the way we prepare food is becoming unique. I mean, a cook-to-order system is a little bit different from most of our competitors now. But that's still not the big reason why people come. So I think all of that kind of speaks to why is Waffle House special. And I think when it really boils down to the part I talked about previous, which is the how we work, we have a saying, we have a long list of things that we teach people, but one of them, the first one we teach people, is what we call what is Rule 1. And that voice in the back of my head is every time when something isn't quite right, the numbers aren't right, something wrong with the people, the sales are down, something unusual happened, like I just got a picture of a car that ran into one of our restaurants in North Carolina last night. The senior people answer the question of what is Rule 1, and Rule 1 is show up. And so we get a lot of attention for these hurricanes and disaster relief and all this kind of stuff about, Waffle House has this great system. I've spoke to groups of FEMA folks and all these other people, and I said, we really don't have anything really fancy. We just show up and go to work. And that's why we wear the uniform, and when we show up, these folks do what the hourly associates do, and we just work side by side with our team. We generally move from restaurant to restaurant, those of us who have multiple restaurant responsibility, without advance notice of who's showing up, because we want to see what you see. And we're not perfect, and we just try to get better every day. And that's kind of who we are. The unique thing about our culture is that we're 100% homegrown. So everybody who started in a Waffle House and everybody who runs hundreds of Waffle Houses, all of them started out doing the same thing, which is running a single restaurant. We don't hire anybody from the outside with senior experience. If we hire you, you're going to start off running a single restaurant, me being the one exception. But I did start at an entry-level job in the office, so I tell people that. It creates a very unique culture. Internally, we kind of compare ourselves to the Marines every now and then. It's not really, probably a wise thing to do externally, because the Marines do really important stuff. But we have that camaraderie, though, because we all do the same thing together. We all have very similar experiences. And there's a lot of things you can do to be successful in our business, but there's only one that everyone has to do. And we try to teach people that the most important thing you can do is to help the people who work for you be successful. So the store manager's got to make sure that the hourly associates that work there are successful, which means they can make a living to provide for their families. And then the district managers have to make sure that the unit managers are successful. And it creates a very unique culture that is all about the associates and the customers and very little about yourself. And so if there's anything I can teach you about what brought success to the Waffle House, it's kind of a steadfast commitment to staying out there and working side by side, doing what we do and not forgetting what we do, and always taking care of the people who work underneath us. And that leads to a really fun place to work, to be honest with you. Our customers are our best friends. Our associates are some of the nicest people you'll meet. We do have a fair amount of turnover, but we have a whole lot of people that work for us for years and years and years, and it's because it kind of gets in our blood. So that's kind of the Waffle House story. We're just kind of plugging right along in the, slow and steady wins the race still. But we love what we do, and we love taking care of you folks in our restaurants. And I think I even brought some free waffle coupons for you guys, so you can have some real waffles as opposed to what you were eating out there. I don't know how much time we got left. I'd certainly love to answer any questions you've got. Anything from, anything you can think of. Yes.
What is the deal with your Valentine's Day program?
The deal with the Valentine's Day program?
Yeah, who started that?
Well, there was a division manager up on the north side of Atlanta, up off of 400, that, we're always trying to build sales. Everybody in the restaurant industry, and if you study anything in the restaurant industry, they always talk about, same-store sales this year versus last year. And so we're just like everybody else, and so we always try to come up with unique ways of doing that. So this one guy had the idea of he was going to do a special Valentine's dinner at the Waffle House, and so we set it up with tablecloths and candles and reservations and everything you would not expect at a Waffle House. And he did it, and you know what? People showed up in droves, and then a few more people did it the next year, and a few more people the next year, and now there's pretty much all across the country, not at every restaurant, but on Valentine's Day, it's now become a tradition for us that, you can take your sweetheart to Waffle House, have reservations, we take your picture, and we probably give you a flower. And it's, on one hand, we all think, well, that's kind of silly, and it is, but on the other hand, they love it. I mean, it's a unique thing, and you can get T-bone dinner or whatever else you want. We sell more T-bone steaks than anybody in the world, by the way. Yes?
My husband has taken me to Waffle House for Valentine's Day for the last 5 years.
There you go. How was it?
Oh, Waffle House is so much part of our DNA that it was the perfect choice. I'll tell you another time.
Okay. What other question? Yes, sir.
Not in the form of dollars, but can you give the room an idea of how many waffles you guys serve a year, how many eggs, how many pieces of bacon?
Yeah. Let me do a little bit of math in my head. Like I said, we're a little over 1,800 stores. We sell on average about 30 dozen eggs per store per day. So that'll give you a sense. Waffles we probably sell about 120 to 130 waffles per store per day. So you multiply anything times 365 times 1,800, and it starts to become a relatively big number. So we're a private company, so we don't talk about our numbers that much. I mean, we don't mind sharing for friends. And we're about $1.5 billion business. So it'll give you a sense of kind of the size of the business. We keep thinking we're a small company, and we still kind of are compared to so many other companies out there, but our presence is so wide that people just assume we're like McDonald's. Although we do pride ourselves on operating more restaurants in Atlanta than anywhere else because it's our home. And I remember when we opened up a new store off of Sidney Marcus in Buckhead, right there close to 85 and 400, and a Starbucks opened up right next to us, and they had the sign out front that said, coming soon, our 100th Starbucks. And we put up a sign in our building that was right next door that said, coming soon, our 230th Waffle House. And then underneath it we put, by the way, free coffee. So you got to have a sense of humor, too. But interestingly, we compete very well with that Starbucks because they don't have a drive-thru in Starbucks. I'm amazed how much of that sugar coffee you guys drink. And they line up around the building and drink all that. But, we really want to dominate and penetrate the South because it's our home. We love Newnan. I was telling Vic on the way down here, this has long been one of our favorite markets, and it's just been a place we've enjoyed doing business with. We've got great associates that work here. We enjoy the great customers we do business with. We need some more restaurants, most likely down here. I know you probably find that hard to believe. I think we got 5 right around Newnan. So, but we could put some more. And we'll try. We'll keep trying to. If someone else could put up, we're kind of hard-headed sometimes. If somebody else could put up a restaurant, we figure so can we. Every now and then we'll get a call from the press that says, well, you've got one restaurant on this side of the street and another restaurant on the other side of the street. Why did you do that? And we jokingly say, well, our chairman's getting old and forgetful, and he forgot there was one on that side. So he so far hasn't fired us for that. But, and Joe and his family are very much involved in the business. Joe is, he'll be 70 years old this year. His dad, like I said, is 96. His dad's not involved in business, hadn't been involved in business since the late 70s. He's been involved in giving us a hard time since he left, but and they did. They went hunting and fishing after they retired in the 70s, and they tossed the keys to their son, his son. But Joe Jr.'s gave me all those titles that Vic spoke of, but he's still very involved in business, and he has 3 kids who are now involved in business. And for years, he said the same thing to me privately, and now we've started saying it publicly amongst the team, that his mission in life was to do the most good for the most people over the longest period of time. And it's a pretty interesting philosophy when you think about it. He's got everything he'd ever need, and he still gets up and washes dishes and calls out orders and picks up trash in the parking lot every day because he wants to do the most good for the most people over the longest period of time. And he raised his kids to feel that way too. And so we're pretty well set up to be a family-owned business for at least a few more generations, certainly beyond my time. You never know what's going to happen after you're gone, but we feel pretty good about our position. And most of the people we compete with in the restaurant industry, absent the Chick-fil-A folks who are just wonderful, most of them are either largely franchised or owned by somebody else, private equity, public companies, whatever. And the idea that those businesses will survive as they are over long periods of time is going to be challenging for them because they got lots of other people to please, and we really only have ourselves to please. So, makes for a fun business. Any other questions? Yes. This table's just loaded with questions.
This is a curious thing.
Yeah.
I love the hash brown bowl that we have here in Enid. Can we get that everywhere? Because I'm traveling all over Atlanta now, and they don't have it anywhere.
Okay, because you say so. Yeah, we tested that here. It's we're gonna roll that out, I think, in September everywhere. So our hash. I can't eat. I told you I eat 2 meals a day. I can't eat hash browns every day. I mean, I could eat them every meal, but they are just. There's some of our products I don't understand why people haven't copied. Our hash browns are just wonderful, and so yeah, that's a great bowl of yumminess right there.
I think your raisin toast is amazing.
I do too. There was the folks at Flowers, another great Georgia company. When I started with the company, Flowers had made our raisin bread and was doing most of our bread business. We're very loyal to our suppliers. But somebody at Flowers back in the day decided that making the raisin bread was too hard for them. And it was gumming up their slicers, and they just didn't want to do the business anymore. So they gave it up to what ultimately was Colonial Bread, and Colonial's been bought in Sara Lee and lots of different things over time. But we eventually found our way back to Flowers. But there's people down there who are still kicking themselves that they stopped making it, but they do make it now. And if you hadn't had our raisin toast, there's nothing like it out there. It's delicious. We buy nothing but the best food. We buy USDA choice steaks. We buy, Fieldale Farms antibiotic-free Springer Mountain chicken. We buy lots of really great food. If we don't mess it up, meaning we cook it wrong, it's really, really good food. And you can, contrary to what people think, you can eat healthy at a Waffle House. It is possible. We do have salads. We do have grilled chicken. We were the first restaurant chain to serve grilled chicken. And it's not because we were that smart. It's because we didn't have any other way to cook it. We had no fryers. We had no broilers. We had no ovens. And so a guy in Mississippi helped develop our grilled chicken breast back in the 80s. And now everybody's doing it. But don't think we're that smart, because we were also Chick-fil-A's first franchisee. And if you look at a picture of old number 1, there's a sign on the marquee that says, "Try our Chick-fil-A sandwich." And we had that in one of our publications one time. The lawyers at Chick-fil-A sent us a letter, told us we couldn't, do that. And, it's funny. I mean, we call Truett or Dan, it was okay, but lawyers being lawyers, no offense to any of y'all. So, for those of you who know the Chick-fil-A story, I mean, Truett had that restaurant. Joe Jr., when he was building a restaurant down near Hapeville, he would go sit in Truett's restaurant there to cool off, because it was the only place he could get air conditioning. So when they were, kind of like a construction job site, he'd go sit in there just to cool off. But Truett's, philosophy early on was he wanted to market and license that sandwich for other people to sell. And this was long before he thought he was going to be in a massive restaurant chain. And so we were a licensee, in essence, of the Chick-fil-A product. And apparently we didn't think there was going to be much future in that, so we stopped. But now they're a lot bigger than we are. Yes?
You said like 75% of your stores are corporate owned. The other 25%, are they franchised to employ team members, who, like store managers who want to own their own store, or do you franchise those out to external stores?
Yes, yes, and yes. That's actually a great question. Over the course of our history, we've been through different phases. So early in the history of the business, Joe Sr. and Tom franchised to people kind of what you would think of as a traditional deal. We license you the name, you got to do it according to the rules, but you have a territory, you put your capital in, you go build restaurants, operate them the way we tell you to, and send us a royalty check, and everybody's happy. We morphed that in the 70s, the late 70s, into a system where we were kind of like McDonald's system. We were the landowners, we built the building, and we not only licensed the name, but we leased the facilities so we could control the location. Today, we are really not actively looking for any outside franchisees. What we do offer, if any of our folks want to become franchisees, we tell people who want to become franchisees, you need to come work for us first. And then we'll help you get in touch with a franchise market or a franchisee. And then some of the franchisees, I mean, they can sell their business to whomever they want to sell it to. So I guess there is a way for others to come in that way. And the current franchisees do grow, and they have the ability to grow. Most of the challenges we have with the franchise system is they eventually get successful enough they don't want to grow anymore. And so they kind of, well, this is, more growth is more work. And so they get to a size where they're comfortable, and then they kind of stop there. But ultimately, they need to sell their businesses, and oftentimes that's either to a next family member or someone in their own business or someone in our business that knows how to run the restaurants. But we don't solicit new franchisees. Our model's a little bit unique. The 24-hour piece really does add a uniqueness to it, and couple that with the fact that we require all of our franchisees to be just like us, which is you got to work in that one business. And so if you own a Waffle House franchise, you can't also own a Burger King franchise. And you're going to show up and work every holiday and most weekends too. And that eliminates a lot of people right there. What? I got to work Christmas? Huh? Christmas Day is our busiest day of the year. And just come eat with us in Noonan this Christmas and you'll see. And it doesn't matter what time. Unless it's about 3 or 4 in the afternoon, we usually slow down for a couple minutes then. But then it goes crazy all night long, at least through midnight. And people often say, we have a reputation for all of us working on the holidays, which we do. And they like to say, well, isn't that wonderful? You let your folks have time off and you go work in their place. And I said, that's not what happens. We need everybody to be working that day. And it would be wrong for us to not work if we're asking folks to work. The great news is that most of our associates really love working Christmas Day because you are the most generous tippers on Christmas Day. It's amazing. And there's great story after great story. I was in a restaurant 2 Christmases ago up in Atlanta, and there was it was packed. I mean, just everywhere you look. And there was a commotion by the cash register, and I was on the other end of the restaurant. And I kind of worked my way towards the cash register, and by that time the customer was walking out the door, and I said to the division manager, I said, what's going on? He says, well, that guy just paid for breakfast for everybody in the house. I said, really? And I said, well, how did he do that? I mean, I can't even imagine how we'd add up all that really quick. We're not the most sophisticated technological company. And he says, well, I just stood here and just said, well, it looks like there's about $300 worth of food in here. And he handed me $600 and walked out the door to give the other 3 to the workers. So I ran out in the parking lot. I'm dressed like this. He doesn't know who I am. And I thanked him for what he did. And he looked almost a little bit annoyed that I was stopping him. And I said, if I ever can do anything for you, I said, please call me. And I started to try to hand him a card. he grabbed my card, never looked at it, put it in his pocket, and he started walking away, and he turned back around. He says, well, there's one thing you can do for me. And I said, what's that? He says, you can tell me where the nearest Waffle House is. He says, I want to go do this again. And then I came down south to, I think it was Tyrone. No, it was somewhere on the south side of town that day. And the very next restaurant I walked in, this guy walked up to me and goes, you look like you're kind of responsible. I said, well, gray hair will do that for you. And he handed me a stack of envelopes. He said, I counted the number of workers in here, not counting you management types. And he says, would you give one of these envelopes to every one of these associates, every one of these people when I leave? And I said, you don't want to do it? And he says, no, please don't do it until I leave. And so the very next restaurant, and every envelope was a $20 bill for each of the people working. So there's a lot of great things that happen on Christmas Day, but it really is. I think you guys really crave it on Christmas, but it also might have something to do with the fact that nobody else is open. So, but it's part of who we are. So, all right, I know I'm going to keep you too long, so I'll be happy to answer any questions up here afterwards. But thank you for letting me do this and let me give you this big long commercial. And we do love doing business in your community. It's one of our favorite spots, and we'll try hard. Vic's going to show me a couple places we need to put another restaurant down here. So thank you for your business and for your patience and for paying attention to me the whole time. I look forward to seeing you sometime in one of our restaurants.
All right, so Walt, just to show our appreciation for you taking the time out of your busy schedule, so we have from Pops a gift basket of gourmet popcorn. So
Thank you
tell
very
everybody,
much.
get your popcorn ready.
It's some good Coca-Cola right there.
Yes, and me personally, thank you for the All-Star Special with peanut butter chips on my waffles, because that's why I'm alive right now. So thank you.